Can we start? Yeah. Excellent. The future of justice starts here at UCT. Welcome to Human Animal Project 2024. This is our second session of the day. We had our first session at UWC. It was great. And we're super, super grateful that UCT is joining us, so that we're joining UCT. And yeah, we're going to have a fantastic 2 hours with lots of amazing discussion and most importantly, call to action so we can all do something, which is fantastic. Imagine a world where the well-being of humans, animals, and our planet are valued equally. A world where our actions reflect inherent dignity of every living being. This is not a distant dream. It's the mission of the Human Animal Project, and we're calling on you to join us in this transformative movement. At the Human Animal Project South Africa, we believe the fight for justice shouldn't stop at one group. True liberation connects all forms of oppression, from exploitation of vulnerable human populations to the commodification of animals and the destruction of our environment. We are committed to uniting We are committed to uniting social justice, animal rights, and environmental activism under one powerful banner. This is how real change happens. Our goal? To foster an intersectional movement that tackles the root causes of oppression by bringing together global voices, and these are global voices, and local communities. Fantastic. Nice to talk into something real right in front of you. From animal rights to decolonial thinking and environmental sustainability, the Human Animal Project provides a space for education, collaboration, and action. This is where we take a stand together. Can we give our two speakers, Christopher and Yvette, a round of applause? They come all the way from the US of A, so we're very happy that you took the long journey to come and find us and come inspire us. And yeah, may today be blessed. I'm now going to invite Carla. Carla's from UCT, and she is from the Division of Social and Behavioral Sciences. And as the University of Cape Town representative, she's going to say hi. Pleasure.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a special good afternoon to our guest speakers and to the organizers who have made this possible. I know back-to-back and two different spaces is demanding and tiring, so we thank you for finding the energy to be here with us. Thank you to all of you for coming. In my imagination, the lecture theatre was overflowing and there were people queuing up outside. And then I remembered I was at UCT, so then I held myself down back again. But the one thing that, and there are many of them here, my students have taught me, is that a small group of committed people thinking and talking together can bring about the most beautiful things. So I am deeply grateful for all of you for being here, and also just acknowledging that today marks a year since the attacks and what has become a space of incredible violence in the Middle East, and so maybe also work towards those restorative justices that bring a better way of being for all of us. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for finding the collaborations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carla. And then also, hi, 16 of you beautiful people. Let's see how many of you are here.
WC and UCT.
Here we go. Okay, 17, one more.
Welcome
to the Human Animal Project 2024. We, in your absence, you guys are obviously online, we'll imagine that you guys are here with us spiritually as well. Thank you so much for joining. And welcome to Donovan from ProVeg. How's it, Donnie? Good to see you.
That's so excited.
Oh, some waves. Hey, clappy, clap. Hey.
And they're clapping hands and all sorts of things.
Let's move on.
Very few people.
We're going to move into the program and get our first speaker on stage, on platform. I'm going to do a brief introduction of our speaker. Okay.
Some of it is
Yvette Baker is a writer, educator, and social critic, and lifelong social justice advocate. Her work intrinsically, I can't pronounce the word, please say it for me. I said it earlier though, yeah? Intrinsically examines the intersections of human and beyond human oppression through an Afro-Indigenous lens. She emphasizes the principle of collective liberation as a vital tool for building bridges between different movements for social justice and collective empowerment. Everyone, Yvette Baker.
Thank you. What's up here? Thank you so much, everyone. How's it? Yeah? Yeah, I'm a local now. I had my first fly last night. So I'm really honored to be here, though. And I spent a significant amount of time contemplating whether I should be here today, not because of lack of passion or knowledge, but because I have a deep respect for local wisdom and believe the local people will know the right things to do on their land and in their space, but from a place where I'm looking at the Black and Indigenous communities as a global diaspora. I am honored and humbled to be here and feel welcomed here. So I believe the power of courageous conversations, especially among Black and Indigenous peoples, our interconnectedness and our shared struggles against cultural hegemony, and the current rising global movement against imperialism calls for unity and action. So here's the picture. My topic is Colonial Shadows and Indigenous Wisdom, Reclaiming Human-Animal Relations. So this isn't intended to be a purely academic exercise, but a call for us to examine the forces that have shaped our understanding of what it means to be human. Historically, human has been a political identity, often delineated by race, gender, class, and power. Yet we stand at the intersection of these identities, and I want to challenge these confinements and explore a post-humanism that values all life forms, not in opposition and not within a human-animal binary, but in synergy. So as we delve into a few topics, I also want us to consider how Indigenous peoples, who make up about 5% of the global population, but safeguard around 80% of the world's biodiversity, clearly offer profound insights into sustainable coexistence. Their stewardship and ecological knowledge, deep ecological knowledge, underscore the importance of collective liberation, a liberation that encompasses not just humans, but all beings with whom we share this planet. So Chad gave you all, and by the way, hello online community, really honored that you're here as well. So Chad gave a little bit of my work professional background. I wanted to give you a little personal intro. On the right is my grandmother from the Isleta Pueblo Native American tribe in New Mexico, United States. And those are all colonizer terms. She is my chi'i. And her tribe, the 𝐶𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸, has lived on Turtle Island since the 1300s. There were millions of indigenous peoples across North America and Central America speaking over 1,000 different languages. But like many others, my chi'i endured face assimilation and the violent residential school system that tried to sever her ties to her culture. But luckily, she retained some of her language and much of the wisdom. And her life was a reflection of the strength that runs through our history despite losing so much. On the left is my mother, also an indigenous woman of mixed tribes. And she's the first person I ever knew who would listen to animals even more than she would speak to them. And believe me, this woman talks a lot. And I remember a bird just outside of our home fiercely guarding her nest, and she would swoop at everyone's head as we'd walk by. Everyone except for my mom. And I asked her how, like why? Why does this bird treat you differently? Why were there so many animals so gentle with her, but so distrusting and sometimes aggressive with the rest of us? And she said to me, I know what it's like to feel small and overlooked and treated like my life doesn't matter. And I could never inflict that pain on anyone else. So these are the two women who raised me. In preparing to be here, Firstly, I was freaking out, right? What do I know about South Africa? But I took a breath and I immersed myself in learning about South Africa's vibrant histories and the cultural landscapes. And it wasn't long until I came across Ubuntu. In my exploration, I found that it embodies the principle of humanity towards others and a connection with nature, and not only playing a pivotal role during anti-apartheid struggles, advocating for social justice, but I found that at its roots, it ultimately came to being a value system of interconnectedness, at least from my perspective. And at some point in learning about it, I was taken right back to being a child and learning about all my relations, which is an indigenous intertribal value system with the ethos that our identity is inextricable to our relationships, whether that be to each other, the land, or our animal relatives. And that we have an individual identity, but more important, a collective identity is the grounding of my worldview. But what I want us to take away here in thinking about these two from the synergies of these philosophies is that both challenge the dualistic thinking fostered by settler colonialism and involve a critical re-examination of buried knowledge and practices. So restoring these values in a global landscape, I think, could heal geopolitical relationships and tackle urgent environmental issues. Lastly, a thought-provoking question arose for me. Does Ubuntu apply solely to humans? Or can it be, or should it be extended to all beings? And if so, I've seen this broader interpretation gaining traction among African scholars, and I believe it opens the door for a deeper exploration of how our relationships impact our very existence. So speaking of the scholarly, we'll momentarily turn to Dr. Alexis Pauline Gumbs, who is, and I quote her, a queer Black troublemaker and Black feminist love evangelist and an aspirational cousin to all sentient beings. How beautiful. She wrote a book called Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals, highly recommend, where she guides us to explore marine mammals as mentors, teachers, and guides. And here I have an excerpt from this book. Once upon a time, there was a giant sea mammal who weighed up to 23 tons swimming in the Bering Sea. In 1741, a German naturalist, quote unquote, discovered Hydrodamalis higas, swimming large in Lux, at least 3 times bigger than the contemporary manatee. Within 27 years, the entire species was extinct, killed on thousands of European voyages for fur and sealskin. So she knows what we know. It is dangerous to be discovered. And we'll leave this here and come back to Dr. Gumbs and this sea mammal a bit later. We'll turn to the discovery, quote unquote, again, of my ancestors. There are some well-known aspects of the impact of colonization on North American natives, including the catastrophic population decline due to introduced diseases and the massive loss of land through forced treaties and relocation, the predatory violence and conflict, and the cultural erasure driven by assimilation policies. But these elements paint an incomplete picture of how indigenous societies were torn apart. A much less discussed but equally pivotal factor was the rise of animal commodification as a foundational tool for colonial control. European colonialism imposed a paradigm where animals were commodified en masse, subsequently disrupting our entire traditional food systems. And this shift wasn't just about a physical displacement, it marked a new world order where life itself would be systematically commodified for profit, not for sustenance or need. The settlers took the most fertile lands, the most fertile agricultural lands, which significantly altered the livelihood of the natives. And because of their vast ecological knowledge, tribes with more plant-based diets were much more successful in adaptation. My grandmother's tribe was one of those tribes, very, very plant-based. Despite the West romanticizing that all natives were fierce and avid hunters, or we were, many of us had plant-based diets, and those tribes that integrated more animal-based foods actually faced much greater challenges with the loss of the hunting grounds and the systematic killing of the buffalo. Those tribes were absolutely devastated. Ultimately, the settlers applied the same brutal methods used in managing animals, the branding, the whip cracking, the confinement, death, To control the natives, they marginalized, disenfranchised, and ultimately enslaved. These practices, initially a part of animal farming, were now being imposed on humans, reducing them to commodities to be used, bought, and sold. And as many great thinkers have expressed, he who controls the food system controls the people. And this has maintained white dominance and perpetuates severe systemic inequalities today. In fact, in the US, around 96% of all privately owned agricultural land is white owned. And 98% of farmer subsidy recipients are white, meaning government assistance, loans, and payments from taxpayer dollars to a lot of people who are already wealthy, while Black and brown and indigenous farmers continue to be denied access to government loans and other resources. So this form of animal farming and dehumanization that the natives faced fostered ideologies of racial superiority. A lot of people think it was the other way around. They hated them just because they were a certain color, and it was actually driven by profit, a global vision of global capitalism. It would eventually apply to Africans as well, victims of the transatlantic slave trade. It also laid the economic and ideological foundations for, as I said, global capitalism, where power and profit were unequivocally prioritized over human and ecological welfare. So by understanding this history, we can recognize that the commodification of animals wasn't merely an agricultural shift, but a catalyst for many of the systemic inequalities we see today. So as we still strive to reclaim sovereignty, our food sovereignty, it's crucial to challenge this kind of legacy. We Black folks in the US will tell one another, hey, you're denying our culture, or you're being white if you don't eat beef or chicken or pork, not realizing that cows, chicken, and pigs were not even on the continent before European colonization, before Europeans brought them there to displace millions of natives and to help them perfect a system to enslave Black folks and to normalize this farming system that continues to disproportionately harm Black and brown communities with this extravagant pollution of land, water, and air. So you might wonder why this matters here in South Africa. Well, enter Big Dutchman. That's a US company with a terrible name that operates under the guise of being animal friendly, family friendly, and offering sustainable solutions, yet we see none of that. Their practices echo the imperialistic exploration of the past as they aggressively expand their factory farming operations into Africa, with a keen eye on the continent's rapidly growing population, set to more than double by 2050. They operate so far in 10 African countries, including South Africa. And Big Dutchman epitomizes the modern day colonial mindset driven by profit and power at the expense of environmental and social well-being. With their leadership dominated by figureheads who perpetuate these exploitative dynamics, because, by the way, these are not the figureheads of the European headquarters or the US headquarters. These gentlemen up top, being nice by saying gentlemen, but they are the heads of the South African Big Dutchman. So we North Americans have witnessed this horror story unfold before. Factory farms obliterate nearby communities, leading to land degradation, deforestation, and pollution, disproportionately affecting communities of color and destroying natural resources. So especially as climate emergencies escalate, denial is no longer an option. South Africa, and indeed all of Africa, must be vigilant against these imperialistic practices that threaten to repeat history. This is a call for action to safeguard the lands, air, waters, and vulnerable communities from the exploitative legacies of colonialism reborn in corporate guise. Probably going to get contacted by somebody at Big Dutchman, but that's okay. So it's natural to question whether modern solutions and efficiencies are necessary to meet the demands of our ever-growing populations. We aren't living in the past, I realize, and the challenges we face today will require innovation and innovative approaches. Yet we still have the opportunity to draw from enduring wisdom of indigenous cultures, which have consistently adapted to shifting social and environmental landscapes. So let's turn to Dr. Margaret Robinson, an indigenous scholar. She says, dominant white discourse portrays our cultures as embedded in the pre-colonial past. This perspective must be replaced with the recognition that indigenous cultures are living traditions responsive to changing social and environmental circumstances. She reminds us that the ability to reinterpret our traditions, our rituals embedded in, enabled our ancestors to survive genocide, famine, disease, forced moves, reserves, residential schooling, and a host of other colonial ills. She says, those who value only the preservation of an unchanging tradition join with the colonial powers in seeing no place for a contemporary indigeneity. Very inspired by her work. So her work highlights the importance of recognizing our cultures as responsive and evolving entities. She has many insights into the intrinsic value of animals that are meant to encourage us to rethink our relationships with them, not just as resources, but as integral parts of our shared existence. What I find most inspirational about the work of Dr. Robinson is her exploration of the legends or stories of her tribe, the Mi'kmaq, rooted in the rich history of the Atlantic region of Canada. So as a Native American, again, colonizer term, I know that some of our greatest archives of wisdoms are found in our oral traditions. They're not just stories. They're like mirrored ways that narratives form a part of our resistance and our existence. So let's embrace the spirit of story time here. I'll be very quick. Akin to an indigenous powwow, where the stories we share are infused with wisdom of the universe from my elders and ancestors. So our oral traditions have long been undervalued. So that's why it's important for me to want to do this, because they offer so much insight into our interconnectedness with the earth and with all of its inhabitants. From the Isleta Pueblo, where my grandmother originates, animals are spoken of in legends as caring for humans with the ability and willingness to take care of our young. They're often called for help whenever we're lacking, such as the eagle with sharper eyesight, or the coyote with a stronger sense of smell, and the badger to dig when we tire from digging. And humans are often seen taking animal form, sometimes shedding their skin and being an animal underneath. In one tale called The Man Who Understood Animals, a hunter chose to spare a deer's life and was subsequently gifted the ability to understand all animal voices. Very cool. There are many stories of animal kinship and dependence, but never domination. So allow me to share with you one very shortened legend from the Cherokee. At one time, animals and people lived together peacefully and talked with each other. But when mankind began to multiply rapidly, the animals were crowded into forests and deserts. Man began to destroy animals wholesale for their skins and furs, not just for needed food. Animals became angry at such treatment by their former friends, resolving they must punish mankind. The bear tribe met in council, and several other bears had spoken against mankind for their bloodthirsty ways, and war was unanimously agreed upon. The deer tribe called together its council. They decided that any hunters who killed deer without asking for pardon in a suitable manner should be afflicted with a painful rheumatism in their joints. After this decision, Chief Little Bear sent a messenger to the nearest neighbors, the Cherokee tribe. He said, "From now on, your hunters must first offer a prayer to the deer before killing him," said the messenger. "You must ask his pardon, stating you are forced only by hunger needs of your tribe to kill the deer. Otherwise, a terrible disease will come to the hunter. When a deer is slain by a hunter, Little Chief Deer will run to the spot and ask the slain deer's spirit, 'Did you hear the hunter's prayer for pardon?' If the reply is yes, then all is well, and Chief Little Deer returns to his cave. But if the answer is no, then the chief tracks down the hunter to his lodge and strikes him with the terrible disease of rheumatism, making him helpless and unable to hunt ever again." All the fishes and reptiles then held a council and decided they would haunt those Cherokees who tormented them by telling them hideous dreams of serpents twining around them and eating them alive. These snake and fish dreams occurred often among the Cherokee. To get relief, the Cherokee pleaded with their shaman to banish their frightening dreams as if they no longer tormented the snakes and fish. Now, when the friendly plants heard what the animals had decided against mankind, the plants, every tree, shrub, herb, grass, and moss agreed to furnish a cure for one of the diseases named by the animals and insects. Thereafter, when the Cherokee visited their shaman about their ailments, and if the medicine man was in doubt, he communed with the spirits of the plants. They always suggested a proper remedy for mankind's diseases. So I find that story very, very powerful for two reasons. The first moral is that plant medicine has profound healing powers. And we know that. But also, the unnecessary use of animals can bring hardship and illness to our species. Systems of oppression and collective liberation. I don't want to spend too much time here, but I felt it was necessary to explicitly lay out that systems of oppression are multidimensional and interdependent. Drawing insights from African animal activists, we see how economic systems in Africa, such as the reliance on selling animals for survival, directly impact the animal industrial complex. Economic hardships lead to poorer conditions for both humans and animals, highlighting the need for systemic change. The legal system here, I've heard it's getting much better. There are laws being implemented, but often lack enforcement, further exacerbating these issues. The educational system, with disparities in race and class, influences societal values, subtly dictating whose lives are deemed valuable and overtly dictating. This disparity, again, affects both human and animal perspectives as education shapes our understanding and our language about life and who is deserving of life. So ultimately, without challenging these entrenched political, economic, and social structures, efforts to reduce or abolish unnecessary animal use will struggle to gain traction. And this is, by the way, why I refer to my work as radical, because it just means that I'm looking at the root. So if we address foundational issues, then we can really work towards a future where we're getting to the root of our problems and we can see some real and lasting change, right? No band-aids on top of issues. And so now we'll hear from a couple of our revolutionary ancestors. First, the globally renowned author, activist, educator, Bell Hooks. And I was going to include Bell Hooks in my presentation, even if my presentation were about dishwashers today. She was going to find a way to be in my presentation. When I say I'm inspired, it doesn't do it justice. So in her words, the soul of our politics is in the commitment to ending domination. The soul of our politics is in the commitment to ending domination. So in her words, we find a call to scrutinize the hierarchies that perpetuate exploitation, oppression, and domination, right? Hierarchies do that. So now we turn to Audre Lorde, U.S. writer, poet, philosopher, civil rights activist, and intersectional feminist, who powerfully states, "I know that my people cannot possibly profit from the oppression of any other group which seeks the right to peaceful existence. Rather, we diminish ourselves by denying to others what we have shed blood to obtain for our children." Wise, wise, wise. So she reminds us also that among those who share the goals of liberation and a workable future, there can be no hierarchies of oppression, right? That's probably her best known quote. There can be no hierarchies of oppression. So if we reflect on these, can our work pick up where they left off? Are we prepared to continue the work of dismantling oppression, of dismantling hierarchies in all of its forms? Or do we just want a better place within these hierarchies? When we're saying we're fighting against oppression, do we mean it? Do we mean all unjust hierarchies, or do we just want a better position for ourselves? Because I remind you, if you look just below yourselves, there is always somebody else there. In my mind, I always see an animal having it worse than I have it myself. All right. So I just hope these kinds of questions, although rhetorical, I hope they guide us as we strive to honor their legacies. All right, so what does the intersection of social justice and animal rights look like? Well, some examples here. Move organization, whose pictured here in the photos. They began in the 1970s, and I think they exemplify this integration beautifully. MOVE members believe that for something to be just, it must be just for all living creatures. So they protest against police brutality. They assert that slavery never ended. It was just disguise. They also demonstrate against puppy mills, zoos, circuses, and any form of what they call enslavement of animals. Very powerful work. In fact, I want to point out, which I didn't at my last presentation, but I would like to point out that they were so powerful and gained so much traction and support from people from all different social justice movements and all people in the area that they were living, which was Philadelphia in the United States. They were deemed such a threat that the United States government actually ended up, we bombed ourselves. We bombed their area to get rid of these people who were building a movement of unity. So there's nothing that's feared more than our unity. Nothing. Our division, fine, that's perfect. You guys want to fight? That's great. If you want to unite, that is terrifying. So don't ever forget that. That's the strongest power we have. So another example, Food Empowerment Project, founded by Lauren Ornelas. She's a Chicana in the United States, and her organization merges advocating for farm workers' rights with animal advocacy, highlighting the interconnectedness of violence and injustice that both humans and animals face within our food system. Some very powerful work, right? Because I don't know how many of you might be vegans in the room, but I know that before I was vegan, it was very irritating to say, oh, I have a vegan chocolate bar here, so my chocolate bar is cruelty-free. It doesn't have dairy, it doesn't hurt cows. When you realize there's actual slavery, human slavery involved in the chocolate industry, for example, right? We have to consider these things. So I really believe in organizations like this because these oppressions don't exist in a vacuum. They really encompass a lot of different forms of oppression. So big up to Food Empowerment Project. Apex Advocacy is the organization that I'm a part of. And we foster a global network of Black, Indigenous, people of color advocating for intersectional animal rights. So we have decolonial social justice missions, and we find that animal rights are inherently involved. We cannot remove animals from the equation. So that's the approach we're taking, and we foster the advocacy of any person of color wherever they are in their journey to advocate for animals. And then locally, we have SAVPOC, South African Vegans of Color. And they emerged as a response and reaction to local white-led and dominated mainstream vegan spaces, organizations, and businesses. SAVPOC is co-directed by two sisters from the Cape Flats who are University of the Western Cape graduates. One is a doctoral candidate and the other a physiotherapist. They offer holistic, multisensory, and transdisciplinary well-being experiences, group workshops, and tastings led by a Black, Indigenous, women of color team of food scientists, health practitioners, specialty bakers, and herbalists who honor Indigenous methods and practices to ensure that we adhere to honoring the land as a regenerative extension of ourselves and food as medicine. If I can say that, that's badass. That is so cool. So I hope there's a lot of local initiatives. Of course, the Human Animal Project through and through. I believe in what this project is doing. I wouldn't be here without them, but when I got the opportunity to be here, it moved me to tears. It literally moved me to tears. And so I really believe in this unity that we have to take on. And there are many more like Human Animal Project and like SAVPOC who are integrating these issues. So I told you that we would return to Dr. Gums and the sea mammal. So let's get into it, and let's hope I don't cry. She had blubber and was hunted for it. They say she couldn't sing. The only sound was her breathing, but she could hear for miles and miles and miles. What a loss for listening. How do we mourn and survive the violence of being known? How does capitalism so quickly destroy what took billions of years to evolve? Some say your death was incidental. You were so conveniently located on the favorite path of sealers and fur traders between Russia and North America. Those 27 years were like a gold rush, fueled by the desires of fashionable Europeans for fur hats and coats, a fashion trend sparked by colonizing North America, a supposedly endless supply of fur. They were on their way to get seal skin and fur. They would kill you and eat you during the journey there. Does that make anyone feel better? Keep anyone warm that your existence, the first known extinction of a marine mammal caused by humans, was collateral in pursuit of other deaths? And an interesting fact I learned is these ships or these boats, killing this sea mammal was also the same boats and ships that had our African ancestors on them. Sometimes they were the same. So we had Africans on there, and we had marine mammals being eaten and to the point of extinction. I think you are more than evidence of the deadliness of a world in which skin is for sale at premium. I think you're more than another testament to the stark implications of European voyaging, more than the indictment of the rush, more than the folly of a dominant way of living that changes the planet quickly, thoughtlessly, forever. More than the deadliness of an insatiable hunger born of chasing things other than sustenance. That hunger outlived you. I feel it chasing me too. So I hope we recognize that this is the kind of imagination, receptiveness, awareness, and vulnerability and courage required to dismantle the normalization of oppression. Movements for decoloniality help us reconnect with our roots, but they also demand a readiness to critically reassess and challenge our own beliefs. And lastly, and I'm speaking to the students in the room in particular, you are trained and educated to understand and value this academic jargon and these complex issues, right? But don't let yourself get educated out of your willingness or your ability to communicate with and collaborate with those who really need to hear from you most, right? There's going to be nothing revolutionary born of gatekeeping ideas that are meant to liberate others. So thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvette. That was excellent. We have a barcode, and the barcode, not the QR code, not the barcode. The QR code will take you to a link where you can sign up for our live Q&A. It's on the 23rd of October. It's a full session for all questions. Yvette, I think what we can do, though, because we are in person, just to have some benefit to those that are here in the meantime, is I'm going to do two things just for time. I know we all need to get home. We're going to have to fight the traffic. We have amazing gifts for you from Happy Culture. Yvette's going to take 3 questions, right? And then while Yvette's taking the 3 questions, I'm going to hand out, myself and someone else that's going to help me, we're going to hand out the kombucha and a chocolate bar that you can enjoy before the next talk. Thank you.
Ooh.
Sorry? Online questions as well? I can check online. You want to check online questions, Yvette?
I'm the most technologically unsound individual.
Okay. In the chat, where's the chat? I got you. There we go. Fancy. It's
Top left.
okay, maybe take 1 online first and then 2 in person.
Okay.
Is there an online question?
I would have to scroll through these to get an online question. So as I'm scrolling, I guess if anyone has a question in person, we can do that first instead. Or actually, chat, feel free to now chime in with your questions. I don't think you anticipated being such active participants, but this is fantastic. If you have a question, please drop it in the chat. Someone wrote, I think it was Big Dutchman trying to sabotage the presentation. Amen, it was. Amen, it was, Michelle. I think so. Any questions about anything you heard, or, also, and this is the ethos, or it's something explicitly stated by our next presenter, but this is a safe space, So me coming up here and saying all these things, and you're like, well, I don't know, I eat animals, I wear animals, like, that's okay. This is something that evolved over time for me, and a thought for me that just, it situates me in my life now, but by no means. I mean, I think I stopped I do my best to not deliberately hurt animals, and that started maybe at 30 years old or something. I spent a long time eating animals and using animals, which, but there's alternatives for everything. So please, anyway, it's a safe space. These aren't animal shoes, just so you know, in case you think that's weird. Thank you, Chad, for feeding everybody. Oh. I don't know how to update the chat. If that is this. Yes, our first question we will take in person. Yeah.
So I'm just quite interested. I used to work for social justice organizations, and I noticed a huge connection between patriarchy and meat eating.
Yes.
So if there were any plant-based options given, there was this kind of gut reaction like, how dare you?
Yeah.
And this is not part of our culture, and no openness to alternatives. And I wondered if you could maybe tie that back to indigeneity and colonialism as well, because it's something that I found really difficult to deal with.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure if everybody heard, but I'll try and recap the best that I can. Is that we're talking about the patriarchy and its relationship with meat and this manliness of meat, and how we deal with something like that when there's meat alternatives. It's like that's not a part of that's not what we do. Like you can't deny me my inherent manliness or manhood. Which we see a lot. It's a very, very interesting and deep concept how meat products or food in general can be gendered, right? Meat is manly, salads are feminine, what have you. And I believe the question was to have me, or the inquiry was to have me tie it back to indigenous. How does it fit into indigeneity, or how does it fit into what? My presentation, maybe. Well, Carol Adams has a book on this, The Sexual Politics of Meat, I believe it's called. So I would highly recommend reading that first and foremost, because I won't pretend to be Carol right now. But, I think this is just one piece of why it is so, so important for us to go back and reclaim and re-examine what there was before this kind of cultural paradigm shift, because this... It doesn't have to, we don't have to identify with, what's right in front of us. Like I know a lot of men who are vegan now who are like, I'm so glad I broke out of this toxic masculinity, and it comes with all of these other things. But just in the same way as you're learning that as a man I can cry, as a man I can emote, as a man I can also be vegetarian and vegan. And the biggest gotcha is that when you look into, this is far outside of my presentation, but the biggest gotcha is that when you look into the consumption of animal products, what it does to your body is actually so much less manly, right? With the erections and with the ability to perform and things like that, we'll just call it. It's actually a hindrance to your it's a hindrance to being manly. The hormones that are in these animal products, right? Because the animals have to take hormones. They're loaded with them. These are the hormones you're consuming, and they're afraid of getting man boobs from eating soy and whatnot. But things like that are really indicative of a heavy infusion of animal products. So I would chalk that up to just a bit of ignorance, a need of education, and a bit of kind of reframing of heteropatriarchy as through and through as it needs to anyway. That is just a piece of the puzzle. But Carol J. Adams wrote a whole book. So I would, The Sexual Politics of Meat, I would highly recommend that, because she definitely offers some, I'm rusty on that book, but she offers some really brilliant solutions on how to sort of change that dynamic. It's really important, really, really important. Are there any other in-person questions? I'm not sure if this chat froze or.
I think that's good.
They're good? Okay, yeah. If any other questions, if not any other questions, feel free to come. Oh, here, I'm sorry.
I wanted to ask about what your approach is to prioritizing issues, because as you've acknowledged, human issues are also animal issues. They're all tied up together, and then you have capitalism underlying so much of it. So how do you choose what to focus on, what to spend your energy on?
That's a great question. So
Could you just repeat the question?
Yes, so there are a lot of different issues which was pointed out, and how do I prioritize what to focus on, right? Human issues are animal issues, are environmental issues, are other issues. So how do I, under capitalism, destroying us all, how do I focus? Like, how do I even approach this? It's overwhelming, I will say that. My personal approach is, as a person of color, I chose to show up in the space where I felt I was needed most. It doesn't mean I have to compartmentalize, right? I go to social justice protests. I'm there anytime I can to support, Palestinian rights, whatever that's seemingly unrelated to animal issues, I'm there. But because when you look at the animal protection movement, it is so white and it is so small, and voices of color are needed so much, and animals are so silenced and abused and just completely ignored and disregarded, that I felt like my efforts were best used in a space that just needed the most help. So if you're in an area, and you don't have representation in one area, there's a really small movement, maybe you can help bolster that movement. You can be everywhere. You can do all the things. You can do a little advocacy online on your phone while you're, doing something else. But that's how I ended up choosing. It's just, where am I needed most? I wish I had 10 lifetimes so I could just be everywhere and make sure I do everything. And there's a sense of guilt maybe some of us can relate to, that we're not doing enough, and that I don't show up for more environmental efforts in their circles, but I'm in the animal rights protests. I'm at the zoo telling people to, stop supporting, this treatments of the elephants. And it's, there's only so much I can do. So I felt the heaviness, and I share that heaviness all the time. I share it. So do we have time for one more? Are we good? We're good. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvette. So when people see me, they think because I have dreads, I'm Rastafarian, but actually I practice indigeneity, because for a long time I kind of praised Father Sky from young. Like, I was 9 years old and I was a born again Christian. You know what I mean? I was always like a little bit like wanting to feel the spirit and whatever else, and it was my indigeneity as well. I used to go to Pinkster churches, and a lot of Pinkster churches were actually the so-called colored people on the farms. And those, the plasmen in Hillevasti, they were probably the Bushmen. So, and the way they danced was like, it was like Bushmen. And on Thursday, we're having an indigenous walk. And we're taking between 20 and 25 people with us as part of the Human Animal Project 2024. And Carla is going to choose, I think it's 7 from UCT. For those who want to guarantee their spot on the tour, I'd like you guys to do something small for us. We don't have to do it, but it's something that I think is very important for all of us to do for each other. Activism these days is not just going to the protests or creating a product or even joining an organization. Activism you can do online. Most people are online. And for example, the Human Animal Project, we have a new Facebook page. Just today, we almost doubled our following, and hopefully we can further that. So it's also an upskill and a way that you can promote your favorite organization for today. We'd obviously appreciate it if you can go onto Facebook, Human Animal Project SA. That is our Facebook group or name page. And if you go onto Facebook and you search for it, you'll see on the right-hand side there's a burger icon. It's basically 3 dots next to each other. And once you click on the 3 dots, the burger icon, there's a tab that says invite friends. That gives you the opportunity to invite about 1,000 friends. And no, seriously, it's cool like that. And if you guys do that, I mean, it will be amazing. And it's not just for our organization, it's just to support your friend. If your friend has a business, do that. It gets other people to also see what's cool. Okay, so that's on Thursday. And then please don't forget about the online Q&A session that we're having on the 23rd. Have you guys seen, like, on milk cartons and in the dairy industry and even with big Dutchmen, right? Did you see they were holding the animals like the animals were their friends? I don't know, man. For me, like, I'm saying I'm not talking nonsense about no one, but for me that's a bit misleading. It's a bit weird as well. Like, why aren't people seeing this? And I'm trying also to change my topics for each campus. I want to make things slightly different and just give recognition and feel intuitive in my expression. And there is a hero, his name is Brian Graham. He's from South Africa, and he protests at a place called Mole. Has anyone heard of Mole? Let's just check if I'm spelling it right. It's M-O-L-A-R-E. Mole. They're in Olifantsfontein, yeah? And their modus operandi, they do about 5,000 gassing of pigs per day. The biggest, and you know what the crazy thing is that lots of people didn't know pigs get gas, and that the bacon that they're eating, it wasn't a slaughtered pig, it was a gassed pig. Now, for me, it's very important to promote and just share this information, because if people can see the means also, it also will educate them and get them to think differently. Imagine that. Doesn't it remind you of something else? We're not going to go there, but it reminds you of something else, that humans went through that as well. The animals are going through it. So it's our time now to end this nonsense. I'm going to take the opportunity now to invite our next speaker, also all the way from the US of A. We had a nice braai last night, a vegan braai, Romeo and Vera. We had sausage, Romeo and Vera sausage and kebabs, and it was delicious. And we had like a whole range of salads, and it was beautiful. And we chatted, and we actually have become like pretty good friends over the last 48 hours. Let me give you his introduction. Okay, Christopher Eubanks, also known as Christopher Soul Eubanks, is a social justice advocate, public speaker, and non-profit director who has dedicated himself to advocating for collective liberation. He is the founder of Apex Advocacy, a non-profit animal rights organization that teaches grassroots activism and creates various campaigns to empower Black, Indigenous, and people of color to advocate for animal rights. Everyone, Christopher. Let's go first. No? It's Alt-Tab, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
Where are you?
In the same one as Yvette. It's just a different.
Is it Yvette's
Yeah.
one? Okay, cool. We're going to escape here?
Yeah. That
Okay, and then we're going to go to?
the
Where's your
window.
one? Window, yeah? You can start?
Oh, it's right there.
Is it there?
Yeah. I see.
Okay, cool.
Does anyone know where the presentation mode is? Yeah.
Do you want to make it full screen?
Yeah.
Okay, Control Alt.
Control L.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. So thank you all so much. I'm grateful to be here. My name is Christopher Eubanks, as Chad mentioned, and I'm coming all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. And before I start to talk about me and the work that I do and why I'm here, I want to talk about 9-year-old Christopher Eubanks. So I think when I was 9 years old was the first time that I ever really witnessed a social justice issue be at the main, on the main consciousness of the world. And this was brought about through the beating of Rodney King. So Rodney King was a Black man that lived in Los Angeles, and he was one night just minding his own business, and the police accosted him, 4 white police officers, and they, for some reason, they thought he was on some type of drug or felt he needed to be subdued. And I guess they tried, and they began to beat him mercilessly within inches of his life. The pictures were very brutal. So at 9 years old, this was the first time a social justice issue really went viral. Viral wasn't a thing when I was 9 years old, but it felt the exact same. I think many people probably, or this generation probably had a similar reaction to seeing George Floyd being murdered. So as a 9-year-old child, I think one of the things that really resonated or stuck with me was that I saw Rodney King's face in so many Black men that I knew, whether it was my father, my uncles, people in my community, teachers, just the Black men in my community. Literally, when I saw the footage of him being beaten, I mean, it literally looked like they were beating all those men in my life. And it really stuck with me. I think those emotions were hard to get over. It took me on a journey of really being more involved and aware of social justice issues as I became older. But that really set the tone for my childhood after that. And yeah, I really realized how our society treats Black and brown people. And I think one of the reasons that it resonated with me, well, when I started to learn about animal advocacy, it really connected in a different way. So the 4 white men that beat Rodney King, they were acquitted. And after they were acquitted, there were uprisings, there were protests and marches. It was really a powerful moment for so many people to really let their voices be heard and, you know, speak through the form of resistance. So this footage stuck with me throughout my entire life. And when I started seeing footage of animals being slaughtered, it wasn't the exact same feeling, but it was a similar feeling, because there was nothing in that footage of Rodney King being beaten that could ever justify that beating. There was nothing the officers could say that could justify him being beaten. There was nothing anyone could say that would justify why they were doing that. And when I saw animals being slaughtered and their skins being peeled, I felt the same type of, it was a similar feeling, knowing that there was no justification for what I was seeing. The animals didn't deserve that. They were just born and wanted to live their existence free from any type of exploitation and oppression. And their skins were being commodified, their bodies were being commodified. And that violence was something that I knew I could never justify. And I think one of the things that also stuck with me was that, unlike the Rodney King footage, you know, I wasn't there personally or sponsoring them being beaten, or them beating him consciously with my tax dollars. Like, my tax dollars go wherever they go. And at 9 years old, I didn't have tax dollars. I was 9. So, but when I saw animals being slaughtered, it connected to me that I'm literally paying for their suffering, because I'm eating their bodies, I'm wearing their skin, I'm buying products that are testing on their body. So I felt a bigger responsibility to what was happening. And that's why I started doing animal advocacy, is because it was a social justice issue that I had never even thought about in my life. And I thought, wow, as someone that was really sensitive to social justice issues at such a young age, how could I not have been even aware of this? How was this not even in my subconscious? So once I kind of clicked, I started to begin doing animal activism in my community. So I've done hundreds of actions with a variety of organizations, a lot of the mainstream, bigger organizations. I helped to organize the first ever animal rights march in my city in Atlanta. I did it again in 2022. And one thing that I started to notice in the animal advocacy space was that it was predominantly white-led. There weren't really a lot of people of color. In my community in Atlanta, fortunately, we had a nice, diverse community of advocates. But when I would travel and go to other places and other cities and other states, it was predominantly white-led. And even the campaigns that, you know, I was working on with my friends, they were led by white people. They were created by white people, and these organizations that were white-led. So it really started to make me feel like, okay, I really need to connect with more people of color doing animal advocacy. So that's why I started the nonprofit Apex Advocacy, where we work to get more people of color involved in animal activism. So just before I even get too deep into animal advocacy, I want to say that this is definitely a safe space. I know many of you may not feel the same way about animals and animal rights as me and Yvette, Chad, and the HAP organizers. And we understand that. I wasn't born with this ethic of advocating for animals or thinking about animal rights. It was something that I transitioned to. And most of my friends and families, they eat animals, they wear animals. I still love them the same. I still hang out with them. It's not a point of contention. They know my philosophy and how I live my life, but I don't look down on them. I don't talk negatively about them. I embrace them just like I would embrace anyone that shares this philosophy. So I just wanted to say that nothing said here today is coming from a place of speaking down to anyone. And also, I want to say that some of the ideas and terms are from a U.S. perspective. So just give us grace as we talk about these things, and know that maybe something may not translate properly, or maybe we don't use the exact wording that is used here. Just know that everything that we're sharing is coming from a place of education and love, and there's no judgment on our end. So as I continue to talk about this, one thing that really resonated with me as I learned about animal rights was the scale of suffering. What's the amount of animals that were being killed and exploited? So from the beginning of mankind to where we are now, science estimate that approximately 100 billion people have ever existed. So everybody we've ever known, ever heard of, read a book about, experienced, everyone in our consciousness is one of about 100 billion people. And about 1 trillion animals are killed every year for our consumption. So, we can eat animals whenever we want, whenever we go to the grocery store, or a department store, or get furniture. They're readily made of animal products. You don't have to ever worry. Well, most people in our society don't have to worry about going to grocery stores and not finding animal products, not finding milk, not finding burgers, or not finding chicken wings or whatever. There's always an abundance of animal products largely in our society. And the same thing with clothes. If you go into a clothing store, you can readily find the fur coat, a leather coat. So for us to readily have all of these animal products at our disposal, at least 1 trillion, estimates are higher, but just on the being conservative, 1 trillion animals are the amount of animals that are killed every year. So that's about 10 times the amount of people that have ever existed in our society. And that's just in 1 year. So if we go back, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the number starts to multiply even, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 times. So that amount of that scale of suffering, even if you're, not seeing animals as a part of the collective liberation view, is a scale that I had never even conceived. So it really made me wonder, wow, all this violence that is happening to them, why had I never really thought about animal rights as a social justice issue? It wasn't something that our society really ever spoke much about. And I will also say that we don't have to see them as equal for us to think that they are worthy of our moral consideration, because we don't see other animals as, or some animals as equal to us, but we still afford them some of our moral consideration. So just like in a lot of our society, cats and dogs are typically animals that are domesticated and allowed to be in our homes. Although we may not think they have the right to vote or the right to, have a home or have property, we don't think that they should have violence and pain and suffering inflicted upon them. So in our society, we do have some moral consideration for some types of animals that are born in certain types of bodies, but other animals that aren't born in those bodies, we don't think about them in the same way. So the animals that are farmed have a lot less rights and protections in our society than the ones that we allow in our homes and be a part of our families. So one thing I want to kind of highlight on the next slide is this hierarchy that existed that I really didn't think about until I started doing animal advocacy. And this chart isn't meant to rank oppression and make one more important than another. It's just a depiction of the types of existence and bodies our society tends to prioritize or give more privilege to. So this is I didn't create this theology, but this is just my interpretation. So this is what I would like to say is the white supremacy's hierarchy. So if you're a white cisgender male in our society, then your existence is favored, whether that's through more access to health and lower mortality rates or access to wealth. All of these different types of things are afforded. I remember watching a TV show, and it was a black lead character, and he was talking about his experience versus a white man's experience, and how he spoke to this one white man at one point, and he was saying that the white man, someone was trying to rob the white guy, and so they put a gun to his face, or they poured their gun on him, and he actually said the guy told him that when it happened, he actually thought someone was giving him a gun, because in his brain he could never conceive that someone would actually put a gun to him and rob him. So that was just an example of this hierarchy in real time. So yeah, so if you're a white cisgender male, our society tends to favor your existence more. If you're a white cisgender female, then you're probably right near that or right below that. But if you aren't one of those two, our society just doesn't favor those existences as much. So I would say that's the human section of the hierarchy. But below that, I would say we have, and yeah, I think there can be very real debates about a chart like this. But I would say you have domesticated animals below that. And I think in history, sometimes we've had, and even to this day, some animals are treated by some people maybe more favorably than some type of human. So it's definitely a lot of nuance to this chart, but just for simplicity, I kind of want to keep it very broad. So we have domesticated animals, and those are the ones, like I said, that we allow in our homes and give a certain amount of moral consideration to. But the animals that are farmed in our society, we don't really view their existence. Our society really doesn't make existence for them pretty easy, fairly easy. Most of the animals that exist in farming are animals that are forced to be, that are bred into existence, not ones that naturally exist. So once I really thought about this structure, I was thinking, wow, why had I never included animals in this conversation? Why had I only really thought about humans in the context of supremacy? And this helped me change my philosophy to include animals in my view of collective liberation. So I began to no longer consume animals, no longer eat them, no longer wear them, no longer support products used on their bodies as best as I can. We all live in a world where the society isn't made for us to do that. So we do the best that we can. I try to, anytime I see an option to buy something that doesn't include an animal product, morally and ethically, I'm going to choose that. But if I'm not in a situation and I don't know where my next meal is coming from, hypothetically, if I was on a stranded island and had nothing to eat, I would just have to do what I would have to do to survive. But outside of the situation, I do everything I can to have this collective liberation mindset where I include animals in my perspective of liberation. So I no longer consume animal products, and I wanted to make sure that this was safe for me to do, because this is something I didn't grow up with a degree in nutrition. So I'm like, can I actually live and survive by not eating animal products? Like, is my body going to break down? Am I going to be okay as a human? And once I started doing research, I found that the world's largest dietetic associations have all stated that consuming a plant-based diet is perfectly fine and healthy. And one of those is the American Dietetic Association. And they state that a plant-based diet is appropriate for individuals during all stages of the life cycle, including pregnancy, lactation, infancy, childhood, adolescence, and for athletes. So if you're pregnant, you can consume a plant-based diet. If you're a bodybuilder, you can consume a plant-based diet. If you're elderly, you can consume a plant-based diet. And I guess, I don't know if I would recommend anyone to be a pregnant elderly bodybuilder. That would be very challenging, but consuming a plant-based diet, according to the science, fits. So, all right, I had this philosophy, okay, I can do this and my body won't break down, is what I was trying to figure out. And once I realized that, I challenged myself to now have this mindset that included animals in my view of collective liberation. And now I had a more inclusive view of liberation, because now I didn't leave some individuals out of the conversation. We have billions of other species that I never really considered in this view of collective liberation. So now that I included them, it led me to thinking about animal rights as an intersectional issue. So just for, to make this more understandable, the Center of Racial Justice views collective liberation as the following. It says, collective liberation acknowledges that multiple oppressions exist and that we work in solidarity to undo oppression in ourselves, our families, our communities, and in our institutions in order to achieve a world that is truly free. So now that I had this view of collective liberation, I began to see animal rights as an intersectional issue. And obviously, Kimberly Crenshaw was the person that coined the phrase intersectionality. And it was specifically from her history as a lawyer, a law professor, a scholar, a writer on civil rights. in our society and specifically in law. But she coined the phrase intersectionality. And if you Google the definition, it's a bit technical, but from her own words, intersectionality is just a metaphor for understanding the ways that multiple forms of inequality compound themselves about racism or feminism or whatever social justice advocacy structures we have. So we can apply it to a variety of social justice structures. So I started thinking more about animal rights in this structure. And so I guess one thing I'll kind of transition into is, how does this actually impact our lives? Some people may be thinking, okay, whether I consume animals or wear them or not, does it really matter? Like, well, sure, it may impact their life and their existence, but what does our society get out of it? Does it actually make things better? You know, what is the practicality of how it actually impacts human society? And that's kind of what I want to talk about in this next section, is how animal exploitation impacts human civilization. And I think one of the areas that I can speak about that really brings this home is lactose intolerance and different lactose intolerance rates around the world. So, you know, why does all of this matter? So the industries that use animals' bodies for consumption, they heavily exploit the female reproductive system. There's no way around it. Most of the animal products that we have in our society, if female animal bodies weren't being used, it would be a fraction of the size that it is now. And I think one example of this is the production are cows and how their bodies are used for consumption. So cows are mammals that are forced to be pregnant by these companies. They are forced to be pregnant. They have a pregnancy cycle that is very similar to a woman's pregnancy cycle. So it's about 9 months. So these industries force them to give birth. And they force them to give birth because they only produce milk after they have given birth, just like a woman would only produce milk from her body after she gives birth. So they force them to be pregnant so they can continue to produce milk. And when the baby is born, they separate the baby cow from the mother cow because the baby cow would want to drink that milk. And our society says, no, humans are the individuals that we are going to use that milk for. So they separate them. They tie the cow up to machines and they drain the milk from their body. And that's what is used for dairy and cheese and all of these different types of products that we create from milk. And not only are cows used in this way, but we also have to think about the dietary guidelines that promote the consumption of dairy products and who consumes these often. So about 70% of the world's population is non-white, are people of color. And a large part of that percentage of people are lactose intolerant. So the large part of the people that are lactose intolerant in the world are people of color. So this information shows some statistics on it. It says 85% of adult African Americans in the United States are lactose intolerant. More than 70% of people of East Asian descent are lactose intolerant. And the rate of lactose intolerance is also very high in individuals of Hispanic descent, Native Americans, and Jewish individuals. So you have someone like Dr. Milton Mills, who's just flat out said that dairy is racist. So he is a co-author of there's an organization called the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and they created a report on racial and ethnic bias in the U.S. dietary guidelines. And he was a lead plaintiff in the class action lawsuit demanding that there be warning labels on milk. Because we have these dietary guidelines, not only in the U.S., but around the world, that promote the consumption of these dairy products that are disproportionately negative to Black and brown and people of color. So this is why it is an intersectional issue, because we have the large exploitation and commodification of female animals' bodies to produce a product that is largely consumed by our society, but negatively, disproportionately impacting people of color. So this is how it kind of plays out in a real world scenario and why it impacts us so much. And also in terms of how it impacts our society in another way. So it heavily, the consumption of these animals and this industry, this animal agricultural industry, negatively impacts our society in terms of our climate change and environmental racism. So according to our world and data, 80% of global agriculture land is taken by animal agriculture. So out of 100% of the land that is used for food production and agriculture, 80% of it is owned by animal agriculture. And 20% of the world's supply of calories are provided by animal agriculture. So we see that we have a inefficient process right here. We're allocating a large portion of this land for a specific type of industry, and that industry isn't providing the world with that amount of calories. So we see we have a lot more room for improvement because it takes a lot of resources to grow and kill billions and trillions of animals every year. I mean, think about how big cows grow to be. So raise your hands if you've ever seen a cow in real life. Mostly everyone. Okay, if not everyone. So we know that cows are like really big individuals. And if we are going to grow them to be 1,000, 2,000 pound individuals, that takes a lot of feed, that takes a lot of water. It takes months and years for them to grow to the size that they are going to be before they're killed. So think about the process with not only cows, but with other animals and pigs and chickens, all of these animals that have to be, that have to have a certain amount of maintenance for them to be used by these industries. So this is why it's very taxing on our environment, because it uses a lot of food and feed and water for us to continue to kill 1 trillion of them every year. And according to Cornell University, emissions for agriculture are projected to increase 80% by the year 2050. So as much as we want to have all of these other environmental solutions, like, electric cars and using reusable bags and all of these other eco-friendly practices, if we're still contributing largely to factory farming products, it's still having a grave impact on our society. So that's one way that it impacts our ecosystem, is through all of the resources and the negative impact. And specifically, I want to talk about environmental racism, because a lot of the places where these factory farms are being placed are typically in low-income, Black and brown, marginalized communities. You won't find slaughterhouses near golf clubs or country clubs or downtown in the heart of the metropolitan areas. They're typically, like I said, away from these more affluent areas in our society. So the people that are working these jobs are the people from these communities. So I want to talk about them and how it relates to workers' rights. So Tyson meatpacking plants reported on average 1 amputation per month in the first 9 months of 2015. So these facilities are made to literally kill billions of bodies yearly. So think about the equipment that they're working around. These workers have to process a vast amount of animal bodies on an everyday basis. So you're working around instruments of death on an everyday basis. So that's why these industries have the highest rates of injury of any industry in the world. And this is something not specific to one type of one country. This is a global structure. So the knocker, this is the employee that is tasked with firing the bolt gun that kills or incapacitates each cow, and they see about 2,500 animals per day. That's approximately 1 cow every 12 seconds. So they have to kill 1 cow every 12 seconds. And we all just said that we have seen cows in our lifetimes. I couldn't even imagine like walking and stepping on an ant. Like that would, mess my whole day up. If I'm driving and I see an animal in the road or a squirrel, I'm gonna almost flip my car over to avoid running over a squirrel. So putting a bolt gun nail through the head of a cow every 12 seconds is something I couldn't imagine. It would be unfathomable for me. And one of the things that I started to notice when I became involved in animal advocacy was that a lot of the people that were working in these jobs were being villainized by a lot of animal rights activists. And I felt like this was unfair because a lot of the people in these situations are people in life that don't have a lot of they don't have a lot of resources. They're from marginalized communities. One thing that I discovered was that a lot of specifically in the U.S., but I think this is kind of a global thing also, is that the prison industry tends to work with animal agriculture and set up jobs for people that are just out of prison to go into factory farming, going into slaughterhouses. So just imagine if for whatever reason you're in jail, you come out and you're working in a slaughterhouse. It's not a really good recipe for society. So, but yeah, so these are the people in these communities. And that's why when I started doing advocacy, I had a different approach to viewing these slaughterhouse workers. I didn't demonize them or villainize them. I saw them as someone that, you know, if I could be them if I were just in different circumstances in my life. And also, slaughterhouse employment increases total arrest rates and arrests for violent crimes in comparison with other industries. So we shouldn't be surprised that we see more violence near slaughterhouse facilities, because these are people that are working that are almost desensitized to violence in a lot of ways. So you don't just turn that off when you go into your everyday life. That sticks with you. So this is how these issues not only impact a variety of things that I already discussed, but they also impact worker rights. These are people that are working in these facilities around these heavy chemicals that are used to process these animals' bones, and these chemicals, they're breathing in these toxins, all the waste and the manure from these slaughterhouse facilities. They're sitting in Black and brown communities. They're going into the water, into the soil, into the air. Cows and pigs don't have toilet bowls. All the waste and the feces, it just sits in these facilities. And it just spills out into this big, large pool right beside the slaughterhouse. And it sits and grows until it's sprayed out, but it's literally festering inside of the community. So this is why all of these issues are intersectional and how it actually impacts our everyday life. And one thing I want to highlight, although the numbers are flipped on this chart, so 15.4 trillion rands are what the animal agriculture industry make about every year. And 9.4 trillion is the amount that global governments give to these industries. So a lot of the animal products that we eat are coming at a grave discount. So if you were to take away those subsidies, the animal products that we eat every day would skyrocket in price, and most people wouldn't be able to afford them. So just think about all the money that our governments are giving to people to consume animals. But the plant-based alternatives typically don't have the same amount of subsidies. It's it's not balanced. So like I said, just think about all the other resources that we could use with these funds and how the price of these products aren't proportionally accurate, because you aren't really experiencing the true price of consuming animal products, because essentially whenever people buy animal products, they're getting a big discount from the government. They just don't know it. It's done behind the scenes, and it's not something that most people are actively aware of. So I guess learning about these issues is what made me start my nonprofit Apex Advocacy. And this is a picture from us in New York a couple of months ago at the Black Veg Fest. We were passing out copies of our Activism Starter Guide, which I will talk about in a second. And I will also like to highlight some of the ways that Apex works to foster safe spaces for Black, Indigenous, people of color doing animal advocacy, because we definitely have a different approach. So one of the things that we like to highlight is that people of color have a really strong cultural connection to plant-based foods and plant-based diets. So these are just some of the foods that are used as plant-based meat alternatives. So we have seitan, tempeh, and tofu. These originated in communities of color, whether they came from China or Indonesia. Kind of to Yvette's point earlier, more indigenous people ate a predominantly plant-based diet. So this isn't something that is maybe highlighted as much in the mainstream animal advocacy space, but it's something that we try to connect with people when we speak about consuming a plant-based diet, tying it back to the community that we want to serve and connecting it with their cultural heritage. Another thing that we do is we address activism concerns for people of color. So specifically, when I started doing animal rights activism, I was typically the only Black man, the only person of color that was doing these actions. And I had a lot of concerns because a lot of the actions and the activities that were being organized, one, were from white-led organizations And they were also white-led organizers. The brochures and the literature had predominantly white bodies in them. So at these events, I would wonder, okay, who's talking to the police? Who's the police liaison? Or what we're doing, is what we're doing legal and safe? Do we know the property lines? Like, all of these things were going through my head. And these are things that the organizers just didn't have knowledge about. I think that since they were largely actions that were done by white people, they had a certain privilege when they interacted with the police and with the public. They would typically like just get a slap on the wrist, or they would just say, oh, you know, get out of here. They were doing something that was a bit more higher risk. But just the perception of a large white group doing an action is perceived much different from a group of Black and brown people doing an action. So I came in this space with a lens of like being used to being around a bunch of Black and brown people doing advocacy work. And that was not the way that it was playing out in the animal advocacy space. So we address activism concerns for people of color. And we also challenge the animal rights single issue advocacy approach. In this space, it tends to, when you're talking about animal rights, it seems to be like it's fine as long as we only talk about animal rights. But the exploitation of animals doesn't happen in a vacuum. So as a Black man coming into this space, I'm coming into here thinking about white supremacy, patriarchy, and all of these things, but it's not really being discussed. It's kind of like, I don't know, for me, it was like the elephant in the room, if that's a term I can use in this thinking. But I came into this thinking that way, but a lot of advocacy was done with, like, as long as you're talking about the animals, we'll allow any and everybody in this space. I've seen some organizations that allow some really toxic people in their groups just because they are advocating for animals. I mean, they have all kinds of allegations about them for a variety of heinous things. And it seems to be that, well, as long as you're doing activism and protesting with us for the animals, we'll allow you in. And that's a very single issue advocacy focused approach. So that's one of the things that we do at Apex. That's why we talk about all of these issues. So we make sure that, we don't leave any box unchecked in our fight for collective liberation. Another thing that we do is we combat racial discrimination in animal advocacy. So like I said, a lot of these organizations are predominantly white-led. The donors are white. The literature isn't really diverse. The people on the boards are predominantly white. It's not a lot of diversity, and not a lot of people in power in these companies and these organizations. So that's one of the things that we decided to do at Apex. We decided to make the board diverse. The board is pretty much me and another Black man and an Indian woman. And our team is predominantly people of color. So we wanted to make sure that we were built from the ground up with this intention around diversity and equity for the communities that we're trying to serve. And lastly, this is something that I've already mentioned throughout the presentation, is that we showcase how these issues disproportionately impact people of color. So we talk about the environmental racism that is happening from factory farms, and we connect these issues with the people that we're trying to connect with. So I have a few of these with me, and I'll pass them out to anyone that is interested. But one final product that we have is our Activism Starter Guide specifically for people of color. And although it's made through the lens of the US, I think there's still a lot that you all can get from here. We'll get from it, even though this is in South Africa. So I'll pass some of those out at the end of the presentation. And another thing that we have is we have a campaign called Pre-Animal Activist Week. And that's where we bring people from outside of animal advocacy spaces that are people of color, but that are interested in learning about animal rights and animal advocacy. So if you're from the movement fighting for reproductive rights or the climate space, we bring you into our hub of information. It's like a conference, an animal rights conference, but with an intersectional approach. And we teach about these issues in an intersectional way. It's a fully plant-based experience for the whole week that we have everyone there. We're watching different types of documentaries and doing workshops that talk about all of these things. And I'll kind of say, as I start to close out, is that there's a real need for Black and brown indigenous people to be in positions of leadership in animal advocacy, because what's happening now is white supremacy is just something in our society that's ever prevalent, and the animal rights space isn't an exception. So if we are not careful, we can allow a social justice space to be dominated by individuals that aren't even not being as affected as people of color. So if this space continues to be dominated by one type of group that isn't really suffering as much as another type of group from this industry, it really isn't best for the movement as a whole. Isn't best for the animals as a whole, and white supremacy will continue to kind of go unchecked in this space. So one organization that I would like to highlight that is doing work locally is South African Vegan People of Color, SAVPOC, as Yvette mentioned earlier. And I'll just highlight something that they shared with us about why they exist and the work that they do here locally. So they said they exist in response to the current and past social, environmental, and economic injustices against the local and global majority. SAVPOC stands in solidarity with various BIPOC who unite privately and publicly to resist daily experiences of racism, too often accompanied by dehumanizing microaggressions against plant and animal relatives. BIPOC are still being dehumanized by these systems that oppressed our ancestors, and that's why SAVPOC exists, to enhance and support revolutionary and liberatory movements for all beings on this planet. So I'll kind of close out with words from Angela Davis, who you all know is a revolutionary, overall powerful individual. And many people don't know that she also follows a plant-based diet. And these are her words. She says, in regards to following a plant-based diet, it is, I think, a part of a revolutionary perspective. How can we not only discover more compassionate relations with human beings, but how can we develop compassionate relations with the other creatures with who we share this planet? And that would mean challenging the whole capitalist industrial form of food production. So thank you all for listening and attending. If you are interested in more information, you can scan the QR code or go to the website. You can take a quick survey about this presentation, give me feedback about what you liked, didn't like, or what I could improve on. We have a list of recommended books and documentaries, and it highlights our work. So feel free to go there. And also, Chad, I will let you speak more about October 23rd.
Yes, before we do that, we can go into one online question and one question for the group.
All right, can you help me with the online questions? I forget how to log out, log back in.
I'm also quite new to this, so let's do it.
I'll get this started, guys.
Control tab. Here we go. Let's check if there are online questions. Because someone is typing. So while they're typing, let's do a question in the room.
Thank you. Any questions from anyone in the crowd today? Yes? Yeah.
Thank you so much. I was wondering, in terms of the rise of the kind of right-wing fascist movements pretty much globally at the moment, what experiences you found in your work in the US? So we know that, like, after the Lancet Commission came out, there was the whole, chug a jug, milk thing to show the kind of solidarity with white supremacism and a kind of idea of whiteness. With the elections that you're currently navigating in the US, have you noticed any different responses to your advocacy, or has it,
Yeah, that's a good question. In terms of, I guess, the place of the advocacy and the role of politics in the current elections, I don't know if I can say I've seen a strong, well, I think, unfortunately, this is also something that kind of happens with the single issue advocacy approach, is that, unfortunately, a lot of people in whatever social party you're, political party you're part of, we're seeing a lot of, I guess, people that don't share the values that we have, that are running for political office, And if they are embracing a plant-based diet, the animal rights movement is kind of fine with them embracing this as a diet, even though they may not share the same values morally that we do. So I think that's unfortunate. I think that's a sign that the movement still has a long way to go in eradicating a lot of problematic people and problematic behavior. Again, just because someone that supports fascist leaders, that group starts to embrace eating plants more often or starts endorsing certain brands, the animal rights space is like, oh, look at these fascist supporters supporting these plant-based products. Like, no, it's still problematic. Like, I don't care what they support. They're still problematic people. So I wish I could say that I wish I had a better answer for how it's playing out. But yeah, I have seen a couple times when problematic entities start supporting the plant-based food sectors or the plant-based space, it's kind of like, oh, cool, they're alone too. When it should be, oh no, we need to move away from that type of thinking and not allow this to co-opt this space. So, yeah. Yes, one question.
Thank you so much. It was really inspiring.
Thank you.
I'm not so good with words, and I'm not really sure how to formulate this question and put what I'm thinking into words. But what about white guilt, and what can white people do to support and empower? And like, where do we come in, and especially if there's white guilt also?
In terms of, can you be more specific with, in terms of supporting like organizations like ours, or what do you mean?
And then like, if we hear about, what colonialism did, and so our ancestors have part in that. So yes, I like I said, I don't really know how to formulate the question. Maybe somebody can help me.
So how do we make the wrongs of the past right as white people?
And new activists and new generations and so on. Like,
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of, to your point, Candace, and your wording, correcting the wrongs of the past, I think one thing that I encourage people to do is look to organizers that aren't being the more diverse organizers. Go into the communities where you're actually needed. I think a lot of times we give to organizations and campaigns that, that check the box. Oh, they are doing work in this space, or they are supporting this initiative. We kind of had a conversation about this last night, Chad, where, Chad was empowering people to like, come be a part of the event or support the work, and that's great. But we also need to, I would say, check our, do the anti-oppression work within ourselves on an individual basis, not just limited to the work that we're doing or the campaigns that we're supporting, calling out racism and racist behavior when we actually see it in real life, not just going to the protest and doing more of the performative things, although we should do those too, and they are not solely performative, but also carrying those values at home. Because even in the animal advocacy space, I've been in spaces where I've been with people that I really thought were allies, and as soon as some racism came my way, they were quiet. They were silent as a church mouse. They didn't say anything. They didn't check the person that was being racist towards me. They just let it fly. But they apologized to me afterwards. They apologized to me and were saying, oh, I'm sorry that I felt uncomfortable and I felt bad, but I didn't need that later. I needed that in the moment. So I would say put it into action, and not just do some of the performative things, but do more of the work internally, so you can actually live an anti-oppression philosophy and not just do it in the performative ways. Yes, Nikki.
Can I also just speak to that? I think one of the important things is that we need to realize as white people that we shouldn't be doing work just to sort of assuage our guilt. That's not what it's about. It's about changing the system going forward. So that means pitching up, calling out injustices. Also, as Chris said, doing the work internally. Push for the change that you want to see. And if organizations don't listen to you, if you go to one organization and say, we need to include race in our advocacy, we need to be intersectional, we need to advocate for the intersection between human and animal rights, and they go, well, no. Turn around and leave. Find an organization where you can contribute, where you can provide value. And if you can't, start something. Don't always be a follower. Be a leader. Take that initiative to build something new. But make sure when you do that, that your foundations are solidly laid and that you have done.
Thank you, Nick.
An example of that is like Beauty Without Cruelty. So recently I became the executive officer of Beauty Without Cruelty, solely based on merit, because I've actually like really been in animal advocacy for a long time. But I also knew that we need to, in a sense, take the advocacy and really reach a new audience, because it can't just be a specific audience. And Friday, for example, I have a community project in a place called Hanover Park. Now, just quickly, before Hanover Park, there's two double-story. There's two double-story buildings. Those are the only two businesses, the biggest businesses in that specific area. It's on the border of a gang war between the mongrels and the American gang. And both of those businesses are slaughterhouses. Not slaughterhouses, they are meat markets, which they call it. And that's where the most violence, one of the most dangerous areas in Cape Town. So also with regards to protest, the people don't really know how to protest. It's very violent. So what happened on Friday at Parliament, it was 4 paws, and they had their protest or whatever else at Parliament. And I took kids, we taught them about the 5 freedoms, about animal activism and animal rights. We took them to Parliament, and then they became the activists, and at the same time they learned. And then there was also some sort of emergence of different races. It's like a rainbow nation in advocacy or in activism. I think that is very, very important. So I think on the white guilt thing, I don't think it should be a guilt thing. I think it should be in a sense like, what can I do? And also, can I assist in also understanding that it's not just animal rights, that also people, people don't know their own rights, and can I take activism also onto the Cape Flats? The only way, and into the townships as well, the only way we can also understand, I don't think people are racist and it's guilt, I think it's just a matter of ignorance, is that we kind of have ignored. And also socioeconomics and things that happened in the past have kind of created a system where it's not difficult to, but it's a bit awkward. Like Abby, for example, Abby goes with me into Hanover Park, and when she started, it was like a little bit awkward, and I knew it's going to be awkward, but now she loves it and the kids love her. And now I can see, like, since then, I saw a little bit of a switch. I don't talk about it much, but because there was that intersectionality and because there was that will to go in and see how other people live, I think it just kind of strengthened us all. So I hope that touches on some of the question.
Thanks. So we have time for more.
We have another question. Is there a question online?
I saw.
Check?
I don't see any questions online.
Okay, one more in.
Yeah, one. Yes.
Well, I just want to extend that discussion a little bit. You also get kickback up on. Like when you do try to make the discussion more intersectional in vegan platforms, you can either get censored or told very directly that you shouldn't bring these issues into animal single issue spaces. And even if you try to engage in a very open-spirited, respectful way, you can be shut down quite quickly. And it's actually harsh, the kickback you get. And I'm also just aware, for example, just plainly the demographic in the room here is mainly white, and I'm quite surprised by that considering the focus. And I'm just wondering how the take has been so far at say UWC, or how maybe what advice could you give us to break beyond this? I mean, it's difficult to say because it's local politics. Mm-hmm. It's to break beyond this sort of white stranglehold on animal justice issues, because it's quite real and people are defensive and precious about it. They'll slap back at you. Maybe some experience.
Yeah. So, well, the experience at UWC was really great earlier. You got engagement, and the pushback is real. I will not lie and say that it is not. Like our organization has been, speaking about October 7th, we've been very outspoken in what we believe in, and it has come with a real price. Like just us talking about this issue in a way is a threat to a lot of people. We've had people from the largest organizations in the animal advocacy space, the largest funders, single out us, and we're just a small team. It's me, Yvette, a few other people. I mean, we have a small budget, the fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a budget of these larger organizations, and we have lost 2 members of our board this year, not because they don't support our work, but because they were actually targeted because of the stances that we take with our organization, since we aren't single issue focused. But when I did that, I was fine with the results of what may happen, because I think these are things that future generations are going to look back on and say, where did you stand? Where was your moral compass? And you were speaking out in support of animals, but you were completely silent on all of these other issues. I think as long as that is allowed to happen, the space there's only be a cap at the space. Like it's only gonna grow so much. You really can't grow a movement if it has this underlying current of embracing this white supremacy structure. So I will say it is real, it is challenging. But I think at the end of the day, you kind of just gotta do what sit right in your heart. Because like I said, I knew that our organization would get pushed back, and I just kind of accepted it. I just said, if I can't do if I have to put a limit on the way that I do my social justice work, it's not really social justice work. It is just something else. I don't know what the name of it is. Maybe corporatized social justice work. But that's not for me. That's not something I can do. So I don't know if that's exactly advice more than it is an acknowledgement of the concerns are real, and it plays out in real world ways. But personally, I've just decided to have the stance that I have and that we have as an organization and live with the results.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Got it. So one of our speakers, she couldn't be here. She had some health issues, and obviously flying, the doctor advised differently. So I'm going to introduce her, and she's also going to be at the Q&A on the 23rd of October. Her name is 𝐶𝐬 𝐾𝐽. She's an independent researcher focused on decolonial thinking and its implications surrounding ethical ideas about non-human animals. Her work introduces Black veganism, a view that challenges conventional approaches to animal advocacy by exploring how decentering human beings from model frameworks such as racism prevents the possibility of a genuine animal ethic. I also have a short clip that I'd like to play as well that introduces 𝐶𝐬. It's only 1.5 minutes. So that a door is mad. Where is the clip? Oh, there we go.
So what is Black veganism? It's an animal ethic that's generated from within the anti-racist commitment. And so the argument of Black veganism is that the concept of human and the concept of animal understood racially inform how we think about non-human animals. That if you are a person who claims that you are anti-racist, you better have animals involved in your interrogation of racism. And if you are a person who claims that you want to do something about animals, you better have race as a part of your understanding of the narrative of animality.
Excellent. We also have a flyer that has that barcode on. Candice, so we're going to hand it out now. Okay. And while Candice is handing it out, earlier on, I spoke about the indigenous side. I didn't get to where I really wanted to be. So on Thursday, we're having the indigenous walk, and I belong to a tribe called the 𝐶𝐻𝐻𝐾𝐻 tribe. It's a tribe, our jurisdiction in inverted commas is from Cape Point all the way to Cecilia Forest. And the reason why we're trying to revive our indigeneity is because besides Father Sky, we also have Mother Earth. And I think that's a massive thing to promote. Also for people to know that they also do have a language, that they do have a medicine system, that they do have a history pre-colonialism. And it has done really well. We do tours. That's going to be the tour that we are taking you on Thursday. And obviously the discussion will be about intersectionality, because naturally it is about intersectionality as well. So yeah, I'm very excited to have you on that tour. So our next events that are coming up tomorrow, we fly to Wits University, where we have a talk. And then on the 9th of October, which is the next day, we will be at Nelson Mandela University. Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I'm now going to call up Zanele. Zanele is from UCT, and she is from Vegelicious. Is that correct? No, not Vegelicious? No. Okay, if you can come introduce yourself. Yeah. Everyone, Zanele.
Hi, I'm Zanele. I'm doing my MPhil specializing in health humanities. And I took a class with Carla Tsampiris, which focused on food, gender, and planetary health. I must say that was like one of the significant points of this year. What I learned in that class, when you go in with just like vague ideas of what's going on in the world, but when you leave, it's like, Carla, did you just say that? Carla, did I just read that? Did I just see that? And that kind of fueled my desire for advocacy, in a sense where I transitioned to a vegan diet 2.5 years ago, but generally it wasn't like for ethical reasons. I was just like, I hate meat. I don't eat meat a lot. I would eat meat once a week. And in my African family, meat is on the plate every day. A meal is incomplete without meat. And when I went into food, gender, and planetary health, every idea that I had and every connection that I feel I had to food was confirmed. It was a method for me to negotiate my self-identity. It was a method of me to negotiate relationships. It was a method that I used to show people what I believed in. My resistance to, I don't want meat on that plate, although sometimes I didn't know how to say it or kind of verbalize my feelings of why I don't want meat on that plate, were confirmed in that class. And today's talks, I would just like to say thank you very much. It's very difficult concluding talks that open space for like continuous dialogue, because there are questions that I'm asking myself right now. But key points that I have taken away from the talks are, there's a phrase that we say in isiZulu, azibuyele emasisweni, which means let's go back to our roots. This goes back to what Yvette said about knowledge. Going back to our indigenous knowledge, re-examining our knowledge and how knowledge is produced, but also looking at it from a point where academia, science, and everyday knowledge converge to meet at a space where none is superior and none is marginalized. We gain a lot from academic spaces, but we should not forget about your grandmother at home who knows about the diet that they used to eat, they used to follow, and how it benefited them, the relationship that they had with nature. I grew up in a family where we did not rely on one sense. And I feel like in the world that we're living in now, our over-reliance on sight limits us. We see the body, but we don't see beyond it. So we don't engage with our environment. We don't use our senses. So if I see the meat on my plate, I don't feel anything because all I'm seeing is a piece of steak. But I don't reimagine. I cannot imagine the animal, the sound of the cow or the calf when it's being separated from the mother. And those kind of emotions that get embodied even within the animals themselves. So I would like us to really think about revisiting how knowledge is produced and how we can create collaborative spaces, safe spaces. And I must say that safe spaces start within. Question yourself, why am I doing this? Why do I want to do it? And how can I do it? And then start within your inner circle, because I feel like sometimes in advocacy, we feel like we need to go out and talk about, oh, this is what I'm doing, and be visible, but be visible in your own home. Be that person who transfers knowledge in your own home. But before you can transfer knowledge, you need to go back to the people. I don't even want to say the people, the holders, the people, I don't know how to actually verbalize it, but the knowledge holders, the knowledge creators, because we tend to forget the importance of the knowledge that is held by our predecessors, our mothers, our fathers, our families, and how it's not just reliant on just what is happening now, but there's always a history, and there's always space. There's always space for learning and transformation. And Indigenous knowledge is not stagnant. It's evolving. As we've said, it's ever evolving. There's always something new to be discovered, not even discovered. There's always something new to be to be shared. And I love that about the knowledge systems. It's in the sharing. There's a space of engagement. It's never just about, oh, okay, this is how it happens. It's about, this is how it happens. You are open. You can ask questions. Why? How? If this doesn't happen, what can we do? And then secondly, the word commodification. I used to speak about that word a lot in my class, and it always got me thinking about how do we disrupt capitalist systems in a sense where we need to question how these systems are kept intact. In the same way where prisoners are sent to work in slaughterhouses where they get desensitized to violence, and it creates another cycle where they still get imprisoned. So they get imprisoned in that system all the time. How do we, and what part do we play in disrupting those kind of systems? And we can look at that as a starting point, questioning ourselves and being intentional in questioning ourselves, not just questioning ourselves for the sake of, okay, this is what I want to do, but be intentional about what are you going to do with those answers. They need to be honest so that you know what you need to do with them. And in terms of diversity as well, yes, let's get into diverse spaces, but diversity does not just mean the body, it means equity. It means ensuring that everybody is a decision maker within that space. And yeah, I think for now, that's so much. I learned so much from the talks. And when you spoke about if you're on an island and you didn't have a choice, I thought of a series that I watched, Yellow Jackets, where they started eating each other. And I was like, where do I draw the boundaries? Where do I draw the boundaries? Because even in my culture, we have totems. My family totem is the bee. And I'm like, I would not kill a bee, but would I kill an elephant, which is another family's totem? If I see Ndlovu, who is a human, I would not kill them. But am I willing to go kill an elephant, which is non-human, for the sake of just, yeah, for fun, because that's what people do. They kill and they exploit for their benefit. And sometimes it's not because of survival, and not even sometimes. Often it's not because of survival, but because people think that they can do what they want to do at any time. So this is the time that stops. This is the time that we can all stand. And I'm really big on unity. I am really big on unity. This is a starting point where we need to unify and make sure that we all align to everything that needs to be done to keep our planet safe, to keep our animals safe, to keep each other safe. Let's see and be seen at the same time. Thank you.
What a beautiful way to end things. Thank you so much, Zanele. I got a bit confused with 𝐵EGLICIOUS, you being a member, but 𝐵EGLICIOUS is a society, it's a plant-based society for UCT students, making plant-based accessible, inclusive, and delicious. So a big shout out to UCT's 𝐵EGLICIOUS group. And then I just want to take this time also to thank all of our partners and sponsors. Thank you to Happy Culture. Thank you to Apex, the Apex team, Christopher, Yvette, and then also we have Tony at the back with his team from Humane Society International. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Then also for Planty Brew, Ubuntu Wellness Center, and then for the media company who has been shooting or covering the event, Omni Wellness Media. Thank you all for coming. Also, we have a very special person here, Jasmine Khan, and she's from Black Vegans of South Africa. That's also a cool group that you can follow on social media. Yeah. Okay, we are over time. Please drive home safely, and thank you all for coming. Really quickly, 1 minute.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, on this.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Of course, it is.